My Thomas Story Library, Percy. This is a story about Percy the Little Green Tank Engine. He was very cheeky and loved playing tricks on the other engines. But one day, he needed to be brave. Percy loved playing tricks on the other engines, but these tricks sometimes got him into trouble. One morning, he was being very cheeky indeed. "Peep, peep! Hurry up!" he whistled to Gordon. "Your express train's ready." Gordon thought he was late and came puffing out. But when he looked around, there was only a train of dirty coal trucks. "Ha ha!" laughed Percy, but Gordon didn't think it was funny at all. Next, it was James's turn. Percy told James to stay in the shed because the Fat Controller was coming to see him. James was a very proud engine and thought that the Fat Controller must want him to pull a special train. He stayed in the shed all day, and nothing his driver could do would make him move. The other engines were very annoyed. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last, the Fat Controller arrived. He was very cross with James, but he was even more angry with Percy when James explained what had happened. When Percy arrived back at the yard, the Fat Controller was waiting for him. "You shouldn't waste time playing silly tricks, Percy!" shouted the Fat Controller. "You should be a useful engine!" Later that week, Thomas brought the Sunday school children to the beach. He asked Percy if he could take them home for him. Percy thought that it sounded like very hard work, but he promised Thomas he would help. The children had a lovely day, but by the afternoon, there were dark clouds overhead. Suddenly, there was thunder and lightning, and the rain came lashing down. The children hurried to the station. Annie and Clarabelle were waiting for them at the platform. The children scrambled into the warm carriages. "Percy, take the children home quickly, please," ordered the station master. The rain poured down on Percy's boiler. "Ugh!" he shivered. He thought about pretending he had broken down so another engine would have to go instead of him. But then he remembered his promise. He must make sure the children got home safely. Percy set off bravely, but his driver was worried. The rain was very heavy now, and the river was rising fast. The rain was getting in Percy's eyes, and he couldn't see where he was going. Suddenly, he found himself in deep water. "Oh, my wheels!" shivered Percy, but he struggled on. "Oosh!" he hissed. The rain was beginning to put his fire out. Percy's driver decided to stop the train in a cutting. The guard went to find a telephone. He returned, looking very worried. "We couldn't go back if we wanted to," he said. "The bridge near the junction is down." They would have to carry on to the next station. But Percy's fire had nearly gone out, and they needed more wood to keep it going. "We'll have to pull up the floorboards and burn them," said the fireman. Soon they had plenty of wood. Percy's fire burned well, and he felt warm and comfortable again. Suddenly, there was a buzz, buzz, buzz. Harold was flying overhead. "Oh dear," thought Percy sadly. "Harold has come to laugh at me." Bump! Something thudded on Percy's boiler. A parachute had landed on top of him. Harold hadn't come to laugh. He was dropping hot drinks for everyone. Everyone had a hot cocoa and felt much better. Percy had got some steam up now. "Peep, peep! Thank you, Harold," he whistled. "Come on, let's go." As Percy started to move, the water began to creep up and up and up. It began to put his fire out again. "Oosh!" shivered Percy. Percy was losing steam, but he bravely carried on. I promise, Thomas, he panted. I must keep my promise. The fireman piled his fire high with wood. I must do it, Percy gasped. I must! I must! I must! Percy made a last great effort and cleared the flood. 3 cheers for Percy! Called the vicar, and the children cheered as loudly as they could. Harold arrived with the Fat Controller. Harold told me you were splendid, Percy, said the Fat Controller. He says he can beat you at some things, but not at being a submarine. I don't know what you've both been doing, but I do know that you're a really useful engine. Oh, thank you, sir, whispered Percy happily. The news of Percy's adventure soon got back to the station. Gordon and James heard all about how Percy had kept his promise and travelled through the terrible storm to bring the children home safely. They both thought he was very brave and forgave him for all his tricks. Percy realised that although playing tricks could be fun, it was much more important to be a really useful engine. My Thomas Story Library, Bill and Ben. This is a story about Bill and Ben the twin engines. They worked at the quarry and they found it very boring. Then one day, something happened that made them realise the quarry was quite exciting after all. Bill and Ben worked at the quarry. The twin engines loved excitement, and they often found the quarry boring. One morning, they were busy moving trucks. Listen, Bill, said Ben. Can you hear something? What sort of something? Asked Bill. Something different, replied Ben. I can't hear anything different, said Bill. Exactly, huffed Ben. Everything is the same, sounds the same, looks the same. What we need is a surprise, said Bill. What sort of surprise? Asked Ben. But before Bill could answer, the quarrymaster arrived. I have just received a message from the Fat Controller, he said. He wants you to go and see him at the harbour. I wonder what we've done wrong this time, said Bill to Ben anxiously. At the harbour, the Fat Controller was waiting for them. Edward is taking the children on a special trip today, he said, so I want you to go to the harbour station and look after his trucks. We'll do our best, sir, said the twins, and they wheeshed away, relieved that they hadn't done anything wrong after all. When Bill and Ben arrived at the station, Gordon spoke to them severely. You must behave here, he said. You're on the main line now, not at the quarry. Actually, Gordon, giggled Ben, when we saw you, we thought we were in the scrap yard. Gordon was so cross he couldn't think what to say. Just make sure that my coaches are ready for my evening train, he spluttered as he fumed away. The twins set to work. This will be easy, they said to each other. We know all about trucks. But they weren't used to the harbour trucks, and the trucks knew it. We'll show you around, the trucks said to Bill and Ben. We want to help. Bill and Ben should have known better than to believe them. The trucks told Bill and Ben to put things in all the wrong places. Soon the yard was in a dreadful muddle. When Gordon saw what had happened, he was furious. You've blocked me in, he said to Bill and Ben. Now my evening train will be late. The troublesome trucks giggled and giggled. When the Fat Controller found out what had happened, he spoke severely to Bill and Ben. I thought I could trust you to work with trucks, he said, but I was wrong. Now go and sort out this mess. Gordon waited impatiently while Bill and Ben put everything back in its proper place. By the time Gordon was able to leave, it was very late indeed. His passengers were furious. Bill and Ben were sent back to the quarry in disgrace. As they began work the next day, Ben sighed loudly. Back at the boring old quarry, he said, and still no sign of a surprise. Just then, there was a loud rumbling. That's a strange noise, gasped Bill. I've never heard a noise like that before. I have, whispered his driver nervously. It sounds like a rock slide to me. Then the alarm came. Danger! Clear the quarry! Shouted the quarry master. Workmen scrambled into Bill and Ben's trucks, and the twins pulled them away. Rocks were just beginning to tumble down into the quarry. Thank goodness we're here, said the twins. Otherwise, all these people could have been hurt. They were just puffing out of the quarry when they heard a cry. A workman had been left behind. Help! Wait for me! He cried. Ben waited as the man scrambled over the fallen rocks to reach the train. He climbed aboard and the twins pulled out of the quarry just in time. With a huge crash, hundreds of rocks poured down the sides of the quarry. Everyone was safely out of the way, but there was rubble everywhere. At that moment, Edward arrived with the Fat Controller. Oh dear, said Bill. This wasn't our fault. Hope the Fat Controller won't be cross with us again. But he wasn't. Bill and Ben, the Fat Controller said, you may have a lot to learn about trucks, but you behaved quickly and bravely in an emergency. So 3 cheers for Bill and Ben, our heroes! Hip hip hooray! Cried Edward and all the workmen. Oh, thank you, sir, said Bill. Being called heroes, well, it's a really nice surprise, laughed Ben. My Thomas Story Library, Sir Handel. This is a story about Sir Handel, who worked on a little railway. When he first arrived at the little railway, Sir Handel thought he was very important. Read this story to find out what happened when he was rude to the coaches. Skarloey and Renes worked on a little railway, but they were growing old and tired, so the Thin Controller, who ran the little railway, brought 2 more engines to help them. The new engines looked very smart. One was called Peter Sam, and the other was called Sir Handel. What a small shed, grumbled Sir Handel when he saw his new home. This won't do at all. I think it's nice, said Peter Sam. Humph, replied Sir Handel. And what's that pile of rubbish over there? Shh, replied Peter Sam. That's Skarloey, the famous old engine. The next morning, the fireman came to get Sir Handel ready for his first day's work. I'm tired, yawned Sir Handel. Can Peter Sam go instead? He likes hard work. I don't know why. No, said the fireman. It's the Thin Controller's orders. You're first. Sir Handel's driver arrived and they set off to fetch the coaches. But when Sir Handel saw them, he screeched to a standstill. They're not coaches, he said. They're so old and dirty, they look like cattle trucks. The 5 coaches, Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jemima and Beatrice, were very offended. Ooh! They screamed. What a horrid engine! Sir Handel was coupled to the coaches and set off towards the station. He rolled onto the platform just as Gordon arrived. Hello, said Sir Handel. Who are you? I'm Gordon, said Gordon. Who are you? I'm Sir Handel. Yes, I've heard of you, Gordon. You're an express engine, I believe. So am I, but I'm used to proper coaches, not these cattle trucks. Anyway, sorry, can't stop, must keep time, you know. And Sir Handel puffed off, leaving Gordon at a loss for words. Come along, puffed Sir Handel to the coaches as he pulled them along. The coaches were very angry because Sir Handel had called them names. Cattle trucks, they grumbled. We'll pay him back. Soon they came to a station. Beyond it, the line curved, then began to climb. The day was misty, and the rails were slippery. As Sir Handel prepared to set off again, Agnes had an idea. Hold back, she whispered to Ruth. Hold back, whispered Ruth to Lucy. Hold back, whispered Lucy to Jemima. Hold back, whispered Jemima to Beatrice. The coaches giggled as Sir Handel started and their couplings tightened. Come on, puffed Sir Handel as his wheels slipped on the greasy rails. He started to climb the hill, but the coaches pulled him back and the train ground to a halt. I can't do it, Sir Handel grumbled. I'm used to sensible coaches, not these cattle trucks. The guard came up. I think the coaches are up to something, he told the driver. So they decided to bring the train down again to a level piece of line to give Sir Handel a good start. The guard and the fireman sanded the rails, and Sir Handel made a tremendous effort. The coaches tried hard to drag him back, but he puffed and pulled so hard that they were soon over the hill and away on their journey. That night, the Thing Controller spoke to Sir Handel. You are a troublesome engine, he said. You are much too big for your wheels. But those coaches were misbehaving, said Sir Handel. They tried to stop me climbing the hill. That is no surprise, said the Thing Controller, considering how rude you were to them. You will pull trucks in the quarry until you have learned to behave better. Trucks! Cried Sir Handel. Sir Handel had to shunt trucks in the quarry for a whole week. The trucks were troublesome and would not do as they were told. He had a terrible time with them. At the end of the week, Sir Handel was a much better behaved engine. Are you ready to pull coaches again? Asked the Thing Controller. Oh, yes, please, sir, replied Sir Handel. He set off to fetch his coaches and was determined to be much nicer to them. When the coaches saw him, they muttered to each other, Grumpy Sir Handel, grumpy Sir Handel. They were sure he was going to be rude again. But Sir Handel was as polite as could be. He was coupled to the coaches and set gently off down the branch line. And from that day on, Sir Handel tried very hard to behave. He knew he would rather pull coaches that looked like cattle trucks than shunt real trucks in the quarry. My Thomas Story Library, Oliver. This is a story about Oliver the Great Western Engine. His owner didn't want him anymore and he was going to be turned into scrap until someone came to the rescue. One day, Edward was talking to Douglas. They had heard that steam engines were being put out of service across the island and replaced by new diesel engines. They're being turned into scrap, said Edward quietly. Don't mention that word, Douglas gasped. It makes my wheels wobble. I agree, replied Edward, but the Fat Controller says he will make sure there are always steam engines on his railway. I'm glad we work for the Fat Controller, smiled Douglas. That night, Douglas was still working. He had taken the midnight goods train to a station at a faraway part of the island where only the diesels worked. He was just shunting ready for his return journey when he heard a faint hiss. That sounds like a steam engine, he thought in surprise. The hiss came again. Who's there? Asked Douglas. I'm Oliver, whispered a voice. Are you one of the Fat Controller's engines? Aye, and proud of it, replied Douglas. Thank goodness, said the voice. In the darkness, Douglas could just make out a little Western engine. This is my coach Isabel and brake van Toad, said the engine. We've run out of coal and I have no more steam. But what are you doing here? Asked Douglas. Escaping from the scrapyard, replied Oliver, trembling. Douglas shivered. I'll be glad to help you, he said. We'll make it look like as though you're ready for scrap and I'm taking you away. The driver and fireman agreed to help too. Everyone worked fast. They took off Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels saying that he belonged to the Fat Controller, and chalked scrap all over him. No time for me to turn around, panted Douglas. I will have to run backwards. Douglas and Oliver started out on their journey, but before they could leave the station, they were stopped. Aha! Exclaimed the foreman, shining his torch at Oliver. A Great Western engine! His light flickered further back. With a Western coach and a brake van. You can't take these. But they're all for us. See for yourself, exclaimed Douglas's driver. Douglas's driver showed him the transit labels. Oliver and Douglas hardly dared to breathe. The foreman looked all over Oliver. Seems in order. You can go, driver, he said. Phew, that was a near thing, puffed Douglas. We've had worse, smiled Oliver. We were nearly caught getting here and had to hide on an old quarry branch for 3 days. I was very frightened. I'm not surprised, replied Douglas, and they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended. We're home, cried Douglas as they reached the Fat Controller's railway. I know just the place for you. And he showed them an empty siding, nicely hidden away. Goodbye and thank you, whispered Oliver. I was happy to help, smiled Douglas, and he puffed away. Back at the shed, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. They were very excited and agreed that something must be done for him. The Fat Controller will have to know, said James. Douglas should tell him at once, added Gordon firmly. Well, here I am, said a cheerful voice. Now what's all this about? It was the Fat Controller. The engines were silent. Beg your pardon, sir, but we do need another engine, said Duck quietly at last. Yes, sir, a steam engine, sir, said Gordon. We do indeed, replied the Fat Controller, but I'm afraid that unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope. But, sir, burst out Douglas, one has been. Who told you that, Douglas? Asked the Fat Controller. The engines looked nervously at each other. Sir, I saved him, muttered Douglas. You saved a steam engine? Exclaimed the Fat Controller. I want to hear everything. So Douglas told him all about how he had rescued Oliver, Isabel, and Toad from the scrapyard. When he had finished, the Fat Controller smiled. I'm proud of you, Douglas, he said. Oliver, Isabel, and Toad are just what we need for Duck's branch line. Thank you, sir, replied Douglas, and all the engines cheered. The Fat Controller soon had Oliver, Isabel, and Toad mended and painted in full Great Western colours. They are very happy on Duck's branch line. As Oliver puffs along the coast, he often thinks about what a lucky escape he had. If Douglas hadn't come to the rescue, things would be very different. Oliver is very grateful to Douglas and everyone at the Fat Controller's railway for his lovely new home. My Thomas Story Library, Bulstrode. This is a story about Bulstrode the Barge. He was a very disagreeable barge who was always causing trouble. Then one day, he went too far. One morning, Percy was shunting trucks in the yard. The trucks were being very naughty and refusing to move. Come on, come on, puffed Percy as he pushed them into place. Ow, ow, ow! Screamed the trucks as they bumped into each other. Just as Percy was about to give them one last big push, the Fat Controller arrived. Leave those trucks, please, Percy, said the Fat Controller. There's an emergency at the harbour. Yes, sir, replied Percy happily. He was pleased that he could leave the naughty trucks behind. Come on, Percy, said his driver. This will be trouble with Bulstrode. Percy had never met Bulstrode and wondered what kind of engine he would be. As they puffed along the line, Percy's driver told him all about Bulstrode. Bulstrode isn't an engine, he is a very disagreeable barge, his driver explained. He never stops complaining and always expects everyone to do what he wants. Percy had never met a barge before, but he wasn't looking forward to meeting Bulstrode. Percy's driver was right about Bulstrode. Today the barge was more bad-tempered than ever. At the harbour, he was shouting at the trucks. Come on! Come on! Aren't you trucks where you should be? Complained Bulstrode. There's no engine and we can't move without one, replied the trucks. You're in the wrong place, not us! Bulstrode and the trucks had been arguing all morning. The trucks had some coal for Bulstrode to deliver, but they were too far away from the water to load him up. Bulstrode was being very impatient. He didn't want to wait for an engine to arrive. When Percy arrived, Bulstrode was sulking, and the trucks were even more angry than before. Bulstrode is being difficult, complained the trucks. Please put us in a siding, Percy, so that we can load him up and be rid of him. Rid of me? Replied Bulstrode. I would have left hours ago if you trucks were in the right place. Percy wasn't happy that he had to shunt trucks again, but he was unhappier still about the way Bulstrode spoke to him. Pah! Look at the size of you, laughed Bulstrode. I'd be surprised if you had the strength to move even one truck. Percy didn't like Bulstrode. He wanted to get the job done as quickly as possible. Percy began to move the trucks, but the trucks were being careless. As Percy lined them up, they burst through the buffers. The trucks screamed and laughed as they hurtled towards the edge of the dock. But it was too late. Bulstrode could see them coming towards him, and before anyone had time to stop them, the trucks went over the edge of the dock. Oof! Cried Bulstrode as the trucks landed on him. I'm sinking! Serves you right, giggled the trucks. You're always barging in and moaning. Brrr! Replied Bulstrode. His mouth was full of coal. Ha ha! Giggled the trucks. You don't have anything clever to say now. Percy smiled. He thought Bulstrode had got what he deserved. The harbour was a terrible mess. There was coal everywhere and half the trucks were on Bulstrode instead of the track. It took a very long time to clear the mess up. Cranky the crane had to lift the trucks out of Bulstrode one by one. The trucks giggled and teased Bulstrode, but Bulstrode was surprisingly quiet. Percy watched as Bulstrode was towed away to the beach. He had caused trouble one too many times. Right, said the workman when they reached the beach. You can stay here from now on. Children can play in you all day, and at long last you'll be useful. You can't leave me here, shouted Bulstrode. But the workman ignored him and walked away. As Percy puffed along the line to the Fat Controller's railway, he passed Bulstrode on the beach. Bulstrode was already shouting at the seagulls that had perched on top of him. Percy hurried past before Bulstrode had a chance to shout at him. "I'm so pleased that I won't have to work with Bulstrode again," thought Percy when he was safely out of his way. "The troublesome tracks are naughty, but Bulstrode is even worse."